Hi everyone, I'm Hannah Chaplin. I'm the CEO of a company called Receptive. Thank you so much to Wes for the invitation to do this. I think customer feedback's like a really hot topic in SaaS, so it's something I wanted to go over today in my presentation called The Customer is Not Always Right. So I hope you enjoy it. Hope you enjoy the rest of the talks too. Here we go. So in all the years I've been involved in producing software and SaaS products, which is a long time, I'm not going to mention how long, customer feedback is a topic where you get a lot of conflicting advice. Some people are real advocates for the voice of the customer in product development, and others prefer to really own the product roadmap and keep customers well out of the way. So I want to explore this topic in a bit more detail. So first, a bit of background for you. Customer feedback really became important for me in my first SaaS business. So I'd run a development agency before that, and we used to ship technical projects for major brands. So we'd take a project on, we'd spec it and deliver it to the customer. So there was never really that like ongoing dialogue and feedback loop that we're all lucky enough to have as a software as a service business. And then even further back than that, I'm sure you remember those weird shiny disc things, CD-ROMs. We used to stay up far too late, bug fixing to ship whatever version of software we were building at the time. And then things really did change when I started a SaaS business. The way we interacted with customers and responded to product feedback was very different. And this is the story for a lot of us here today, and the story of how a lot of technology businesses now operate. So a lot of customers now ship weekly. I'm sure we'd all like to do that. Even large enterprise organisations have a much quicker release cadence than they used to, and are generally becoming more agile on the whole. And I think because of this, customers are really demanding to be heard now. So if you're a serious SaaS company, I really think you've got to be listening, and it's what users expect. And product feedback has become, really integral part of the experience we're actually giving to our users. So needless to say, first SaaS business came along, didn't know what I was doing. Loads of lessons were learned. But when it comes to the feedback side and dealing with customers, there were two situations that really kind of stuck in my mind. Lego, oh my gosh. So we were selling to SMEs and we were receiving a large amount of feature requests. And it felt like this Lego picture, all crazy, jumbled up. We didn't know which feedback was coming from free trialers. We didn't know which feedback was coming from small accounts or large accounts. And the reality is that all those different types of user have very different demands on your product. So you can't look at customer feature requests and feedback in a big lump or all muddled together. The other big lesson involves whales, and I've no idea if this is a common saying or we just made it up, but we like to say watch out for whales. So we landed this big, it was a Canadian company actually, it was our biggest account by a long way, and what happened is we actually started to get pulled around by their feature requests, and eventually they churned. The product was set up for SMEs, they were stretched too far, and we simply weren't able to resource a company of that size for the amount that we were charging them. So those are the two big things from the first SaaS business that I really took away. So that customers aren't always right, and you shouldn't jump on every single request you receive and every piece of feedback. But that despite that, the voice of the customer is actually intrinsic to the success of the very best SaaS companies. So I think the voice of the customer can be really tricky to actually incorporate into product development. So I'd like to explore, is the customer right, or do their demands, does that hamper your innovation and you end up just building a copycat SaaS product? I think that is a real fear a lot of people in SaaS have. I'd like to go over some tips and best practices. I like to be very practical about how you actually set up a scaling SaaS organisation to make the most of your feedback. And then why saying yes to all feature requests actually doesn't make anyone happy, not even your customers. So all the way through, like I say, I'll try and bring some real examples and best practices, because I'd love for you to take something practical away. So does listening to customers hamper innovation? Like I said, it this is a real fear a lot of us have. And I meet a lot of founders and product managers who have, quite rightly, a very strong vision for where they want their product to go. And they've dreamed up how they think a piece of software should work, and then they just get building. There's some aspects of that are really good, like having a vision. You need that and a reason for being. You know that better than anyone else. And it's very motivational for anyone you work with and customers too. But it can be dangerous if you're not validating your ideas and validating market demand actually, as you go along. So the best thing me and my co-founder Dan did when we started Receptive was we actually spent 4 to 6 months just on customer development. So we had this lovely bright orange prototype, and we'd built that to solve an issue we had in our business. But we also were wise enough at this point to know that we weren't the market. And there's a really cool book actually called The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, and that helped us to design, really good open-ended questions to ask. And it was through that process that we learned whether there was a market for our product, which personas and size of company we should actually be selling to. And most importantly, through the process of customer development, we came out of the other side of it with a much bigger, more exciting vision for the business than we'd had at the very beginning. And we could only learn that through interacting with others. And it's the same with customer feedback. You could be a great team and bring voice of customer into your development without hampering innovation. And I'll go into that a little bit more shortly. But the big takeaway is just to help you with that fear a little bit. Like, listening to customers and listening to what they're demanding absolutely does not mean you're building everything they ask for. And my favourite example of this is, I hope we've got some Simpsons fans, is Homer's car. There's this really cool episode where Homer Simpson is the ideal customer, or the average American man. And he's left to create a car, and it just ends up completely bonkers, like really impractical. And at the launch, he pictures it as powerful like a gorilla, yet soft and yielding like a Nerf ball. And then when the car is revealed, everyone is just like, what is this overpriced monstrosity? This is really the fear we've got, right? That listening to users means we end up with Homer's car or a copycat of every other SaaS product that's in our space. So I think you can absolutely innovate and do it in the right way that brings the customer along with you. And these are the ways where you can really use the voice of the customer. The first is improvements to what you already have. Customers are amazing at this. Like, just remember, you as someone who works at or has founded a SaaS company, you know your product inside out. Customers will use your product very, very differently. So they know all the little tiny things in your product that might not seem like a big deal, but actually they make a very, very big difference to the day-to-day experience that your users are having, and it makes them much happier. The second thing is we've always talked to customers about pain points and goals and use cases and not features, and that's a really useful way of framing discussions. And even if you've got a product roadmap in place for the next 2 years, just remember you can bring the customer along with you. Keeps them really excited, involved in what you're doing, and then it's empowering teams to build good solutions to customer problems. Feedback doesn't end when a suggestion by a customer's made. It's like the starting point of a conversation, and their pains can really help you see how you can build your product to help. And then just remember, customer feedback is actually a really big opportunity. Staying close to customers is a big competitive advantage, especially since customers will be familiar with other software in your space, they understand what competition's doing, and a lot of what they're telling you can actually feed into sales, it can feed into your marketing, and it helps you know where you fit. So staying close to our ideal customer helps you build a really compelling story. And you can really become a market leader by offering customers a really good experience, and product feedback is a big part of that. So, quick little roundup. The best companies really do listen to customers because they've got a unique view of your product. They can bring so much to you, so start treating them like you're on the same team, because you are. And just remember, you should and can have a strong vision. You should design solutions, but at the same time, just make sure you understand your customers too. So, a bit of a practical bit. I thought about what 3 things make the biggest impact that I've seen over and over again in hundreds of SaaS companies now. And these are the 3 things that will help you make the most out of product feedback that you get from your customers. And with a little bit of process, it actually helps you say no to requests that don't align with your business strategy, helps keep everyone aligned too. So the 3 things are to build a feedback library, not a feature backlog, bit controversial. Make sure you're collecting the right information when you reach out to customers. And finally, make sure you're actually using the data that you're receiving and communicating well, because there's nothing worse for customers than you taking ideas and feedback off them, and then you just let it stew or disappear completely. First up then, the controversial one, building a feedback library and not a feature backlog. I think traditionally in SaaS development, we do have this concept, right, of a feature request or an ideas backlog. I've always thought that sounded really flipping miserable. The definition of backlog is an accumulation, especially of unfinished work or unfilled orders. And this suggests you're constantly building this growing monster of requests and ideas that need to be done and you just haven't yet. I think it's really important we change that mindset to develop the best SaaS product. I think the product management community need to ditch this idea completely because it's a horrible concept and very unhelpful for you and your customers. Instead of a backlog of unfinished work and tasks to be done, I really encourage you to see product feedback as a library. So you can build a library, share what you're working on, and then your product teams can go and access the information as they need it. So make sure all your product feedback is going into a central place. So your customer success teams know where to put things when they've had a conversation with the customer. Product teams know where to access the information, and everyone knows what to do. Because the reality is, you'll be receiving product feedback from teams, from sales, and prospects and customers, every single day. So instead of seeing it as this big list of things to be done, see it as you're putting all this data in one place and then you are in control of accessing it when you need it. So some examples: if you're working on a redesign project, the feedback you'll have received over time will be probably relevant regardless of when it was submitted. So we regularly come back to requests in our feedback repository when a project lands on our roadmap. So we control our roadmap. There's strategic projects on there. There's things that customers need on there. There's things that maybe prospects need on there as well. But we look at the use cases we've got for customers, the teams and prospects. And then it helps us understand what we need to improve. And then we are empowered to design a solution that works for our customers, but also for our business too. So obviously part of making that library work is making sure you're collecting good information to start with. I was recently talking to a friend about this, and their experience was a great story of how I think we should be approaching this concept in SaaS as well. So we've got a friend called Ian. He runs a company called 3 Edges, and they specialise in workplace performance. So it's essentially how your work environment impacts the performance of your team and of the business. And they were finding that when they talked to people about what they needed in their workplace to be successful and productive, everyone talked about physical things. I need a bean-to-cup coffee machine. I need 10 desks. I want 5 monitors. It's essentially the equivalent of a software feature request. But this wasn't helpful. This didn't empower Ian and his team or the architects to design workplaces that were productive and efficient for all those different personas. So they created, it's like this little briefcase, it's really cute. And they use it to facilitate discussions. And then by doing this, they found that the conversation moved away from those physical items to needs and pain points. And then the workplaces they were able to design were really effective because they really understood what every persona needed and why. And we really need to do the same in our SaaS products. And it doesn't take much. It's just a case of, in the conversations we're already having, we just need to ask those right questions. So you might have an ongoing separate channel where customers give you feedback, or you might reach out for feedback to enhance what you're already building or to get ideas. But the key, regardless of the format really, is like I say, to ask the right things. So, ask customers things like, what are you trying to achieve? How often do you need this? What's your workaround? What's the impact? And then you can do some really neat stuff like bring in the MRR value, the location of your customers, because that might be relevant, the job role, the priority. You can really enhance that information with these other snippets of data that you already have. And again, it goes back to that point. Instead of saying, here's a backlog of features, product team, you're saying, here's a library of use cases that you can use to design great solutions at the right time. So the way we do this, we've got a feedback channel that's separate from the support channel, and our customers give us feedback ongoing, and they prioritise what's important to them. And on that feedback form, we ask these questions. Just recently, just the other week, a really great example came up. We've been looking at an intercom integration. It's a top priority for our current customers. Strategically, it makes sense. And we're getting a lot of demand from prospects as well through our sales team. And it kind of sounds simple on the surface, integrate with intercom. But because we'd asked these questions, the actual spectrum of what people needed to achieve with that integration was very, very wide. But through understanding those use cases, we've been able to spec out iteration 1 of the integration that's going to work really well. And you know what it's like. You release something that's very much iteration 1, we'll get more feedback in, and we'll go from there. Just a quick example. So, to make the library work, as well as asking the right questions, I highly recommend putting a product feedback policy in place. It's a bit like an SLA or support level agreement. Can you imagine trying to run a support team with no idea of what's expected? It would be insane. And it's becoming the same with product feedback. And all it is a really short document that you put on your help docs or on your website. And all it does is explain how you collect and use product feedback, and then how you communicate back to your customers. The main thing here is that you're setting expectation. You're explaining that you gather product feedback, and then you use it to help you develop the product. But it stops teams and customers feeling like everything they send to you should be acted on immediately. And honestly, even if you review new ideas from customers every 6 months, if you tell them, then they know. Just add a little bit of transparency to the process, set those expectations, and then customers genuinely really, really appreciate it, and it helps keep them excited about what you do have planned. So it's really easy to do. If you go to productfeedbackpolicy.com, there's actually a template and loads of examples on there. It's honestly worth an hour of your time. So quick recap, collect all your product feedback in one place. Think of it as a library of use cases, not a big backlog of feature requests that have no context to them, because as we know, that's very unhelpful for everyone. And once you're doing that, you need to actually use that data you're receiving. Because when you use it, why not use it? It can lead to really good product decisions, and it can help with communication as well. So, how do you actually use the product feedback? You're getting it in one place, you're looking through it. How do you decide which of those things is actually important? Which things are going to really help the growth of your company and help your customers too? First off, just know your company strategy. If you haven't got a strategy in place or you don't know where to access it, just go and find out, because you really need a strategy, because it's the framework that you make product decisions against. It acts as the guiding light, basically. So, for example, if your company goal is to close more enterprise accounts, don't go and look at all the use cases and bits of feedback from trialers. Like I said earlier, the use cases and the demand on the product will be very, very different based on the type of person. And it's really vital that you're doing this, because not all product feedback is equal, and nor should it be. And what I mean by that is quite simple, really. Product feedback only ever comes from 3 places, which is a bit of a revelation. It can sometimes feel like you're being completely bombarded by the entire planet. You get feedback from customers, you get feedback from your teams, and you get feedback from the market or your prospects through the sales team. And different feedback from these different voices simply becomes relevant at different times, which is why, again, going to bang on about it, seeing feedback as a library is much more productive. And if we look at this little pie chart in more detail, we can see the reality of product feedback and what product and customer success teams are dealing with every day. If you actually start to segment this down, it looks pretty mad. And this highlights where if you or the product team are saying yes to every request you receive, that's totally when you get that Homer's car scenario in your SaaS product, or you just end up building something that really isn't innovating. It doesn't make you happy, it doesn't make your customers happy. So I guess I want you to take away that you shouldn't ever have a knee-jerk reaction to feedback. If you do, you actually look out of control and it's not very reassuring for your customers. Understand what your company's strategy is, and then you'll know which pieces and segments of feedback are relevant to you right now, and you can really, really use that to your advantage. Again, running through some quick examples. If your strategy is to get more free trialers converting to paying users, then look at feedback from free trialers. If you're trying to close enterprise deals, look at what your current enterprise customers are demanding from your product and what prospects are saying too. And you can quickly see where your product and marketing materials can be improved to help reach your goals. Final point from all of this is that just don't forget to communicate back to customers. It's a really big opportunity for you as a business to stand out. Most customer success and product teams are probably pestered for product updates on a daily, if not hourly basis in some cases. So a little bit of communication can go a really, really long way in building trust and keeping everyone on the same page. I think in reality, a lot of SaaS companies really fail at this at the moment. I've personally had this experience a lot of times. You contact a SaaS company with feedback and they say, you get a really generic response back. They say things like, oh, thanks, I'll put it on the backlog. Oh, thanks, I've passed it to the product team. And then you just hear nothing. Like, where did that feedback go? Was it used? Was it relevant? Like, what now? And this really matters because there aren't many opportunities for most of us to directly connect with users, especially at large scale, and experience matters a lot. I think feedback is a big opportunity to give customers a great experience because when you ignore them, it tells them a lot about how much you value them. And for most of us, the number of opportunities we get to have that direct connection reduces with scale. Like I used to know every customer, the name of the kids, the name of the dogs. But as you get bigger, it's simply impossible. So as your customer base grows, the human-to-human interaction is usually through a support ticket or through a piece of product feedback. So these opportunities can become very few and far between for a lot of your users. So, really seize that opportunity. Inspire confidence with a strong direction on product and communicate well because customers will love you for it. So some other practical things that work really well just to add a bit of transparency and communication, things that really do improve that experience for your customers are things like sharing a release log. And this really doesn't have to be a lot of effort. Just pop it on your blog, get a public release log, and just get everything on there, not just the things customers have requested directly. You'll always be working on things that customers didn't request, but it's these strategic projects and other pieces of work that are actually really something to shout about, and more often than not, your customers will share in that excitement. And it also helps them to understand where their requests fit with what's actually going on. This is also a bit of a controversial one, and because it can be really scary for a lot of people, but I'm a real big advocate for having a customer-facing roadmap. And that doesn't mean showing absolutely everything, and especially not publicly. Like here at Receptive, our roadmap is only accessible to our customers. And again, not absolutely everything is on there. We just share the things that are relevant and useful. And there's no need to go into like tons of detail. This isn't a Gantt chart with a day-by-day kind of plan of what's happening. In fact, we don't really even have timescales on ours. We just have things that are planned and things that are in progress. But we choose to share this information with customers because it really helps, keeps everyone aligned. But the takeaway from that one is, do what's right for you and your business. There'll be different levels of transparency that are good for different companies. So pick what works for you, but I would really encourage you to think about sharing a bit of information. And I think this final point gets missed a lot when we talk about feedback. Make sure you're bringing the customer voice into what you are working on. Like I said right at the start, customers' experience of your product is very different to yours, and they can enhance your vision, they can enhance your strategic projects and help you to develop features and product improvements that have a really positive impact. So it isn't about customers giving you ideas and you just building them. It's about bringing the customers into those things that you're working on anyway. So yeah, just actively involve customers in the process. Get them talking to you from day one on those strategic projects as well. So in summary, create a product feedback policy. It just gets everyone aligned. Everyone knows where feedback goes, how to access it, how they're going to be communicated to. Capture customer feedback in one place to build that library. Understand how your product teams are going to review and use that data so that you can communicate back to your customers too. So, to circle right back round to the start then, of course the customer is not always right. Don't even really know what being right means in this case, it's kind of a bit odd. But different voices will be relevant to your organisation at different times depending on what you're working on. Collect the information, use it when you need it. But also I think it's important to understand that we're not right either. We're not always going to be right about what to build, and that's where balancing things off with the customer can be a really useful exercise. But it's not about being right or wrong. The big takeaway is that you are a great team together. You both experience your product differently, and bring different expertise to the party. You can't be every customer, but you can absolutely set up your SaaS organisation to embrace customer use cases, bring their voice into strategic projects, and then believe me, you'll sit back and see some real magic happen. So I put a landing page together. If you just follow this link here, it's got loads of different resources on the topics I've talked about, so go and check that out. Feel free to contact me. This was designed to get you thinking, so ping me, ask me questions, because obviously everyone's situation is different. And thank you again.